12 past the hour. Here's Katie.
Thanks, Matt. New York City police officer Sam Esposito is one of the lucky ones. After freeing several victims of Tuesday's World Trade Center collapse, he was knocked unconscious and trapped under the rubble. Luckily, he escaped, and he's got his own very dramatic story of survival. Officer Esposito, Sam, thanks very much for coming in.
Good morning.
How are you feeling? I should mention that what did you break your wrist and broke your kneecap?
Yeah.
And you have a cast all the way up
from here down, yeah.
And you're in a fair amount of pain this morning.
Well, I'd say so, yes.
But you're obviously feeling extremely fortunate, aren't
yes.
you?
Very.
You were on vacation, Sam. I know that this past week you were scheduled to be on vacation.
Working.
Tell me how you happened to come upon this horrific scene.
I had to appear at headquarters at 9 o'clock. I had a 9 o'clock appearance to go and pick up some paperwork. And when I got there, headquarters had been closed. They were evacuating everybody. So at that point, I just decided that I was going to go home. But the trains had stopped, and there was no way out of the area that I was in. And when you looked up, you could see the World Trade Center on fire.
So you
just
rushed
saw
there,
it right there,
as you're trained to do, to try to help.
Well, I went up to several police officers and a couple of sergeants, and I said, look, I'm off duty. I didn't have any identification on me at the time, but I said, I'm willing to do whatever it is to help, because I saw the panic in the streets.
You got to the scene after the building, the tower on the left, which was the second tower. After that had collapsed?
I was at the scene before either one of them collapsed, but when the first one collapsed, I never realized. You didn't realize that a building even collapsed at that point. You just heard a rumble. You didn't know it collapsed, and you saw people running in the streets. So obviously we were trying to escape from the dust and the rubble that was coming towards us. But I didn't realize that the building had fell at that point, because you really couldn't see it. The smoke had encased the whole entire building. The other tower, the one with the antenna on it, that was the one that I could visibly, and the people that were with me could visibly see burning.
You then saw it collapse?
Then we watched it collapse. And then at that point, we just ran. We ran around the corner into a car door, so that when the dust and the rubble started shooting down, I believe it was Vesey Street, we were hidden inside of a doorway so that the dust would pass us.
After that happened,
then I ran out to see if there were any survivors, and I ran right towards the Trade Center, because I knew that there were firemen and police officers who were buried. I knew that there were people that were trapped.
What happened when you got into that building that had pretty much collapsed? Were you able to...
Well, I didn't. What happened was I ran to the site, and I opened up every door of every vehicle, whether it be a police car, a fire truck, an ambulance. I opened every door to make sure that there was nobody trapped inside of there. When I realized that there was nobody trapped, most of the vehicles were on fire, I went to the doorway of the building to see if there were any trapped police officers or firemen inside of the building, because obviously the building had just fell and it took everybody by surprise. When I ran inside the building, I was yelling out, is there anybody in there that needs help? Does anybody hear me? Does anybody need help? And unfortunately, you can hear the cries of people inside the rubble, and you're pretty much helpless at that point. You know, you're trying to get closer to them, but the flames are very, very strong and intense.
And they were begging for help, which I think must be something that has haunted you ever since. These people who you couldn't help.
There was nothing humanly possible that I can do, and I just stood there. I didn't know what to do, and I just continued forward, because I knew that there may be somebody in there that I could help. And there were several people that were on the floor, and they needed assistance getting up, but they pretty much weren't hurt. And I showed them where the door was, and I ran back in. And because I figured if there were several people there, there had to be more around the car door.
You did help 5 people get out of that building. I mean, we shouldn't minimize your tremendous contribution.
Well,
and I'm sure those 5 people are very, very grateful that you helped them. You also convinced an older firefighter, is that right? What happened was, when I was inside the building, and there was a daycare. I don't know what building. I just remember seeing a daycare, and across from the daycare, I heard an old man saying, I'm over here, I'm over here. And when I went inside the room, there was this old man on the floor with his radio, listening to everything. And I said, you got to go. And he said, would you believe that I'm the deputy fire warden of this building? And I said, well,
I have to get you out of here. This building is not stable. It's going to fall. And he said, but this is my job. And I said, I have to get you out of here. And then I asked him, I said, what's your name? And he said, I believe he said Arthur, but I remember Spellman. And I said, well, Mr. Spellman, I'm Police Officer Esposito, and you're going to have to listen to me. Put your arm around my shoulder, and we have to leave. And all he cared about was the building and the fact that he couldn't do his job efficiently. And he felt so bad, and he wanted to get his sunglasses. He needed his glasses because the smoke was really bad. But he held on to his radio because he said the last bombing they didn't have a radio, and this time he wanted a radio with him. And that really was, you know, and he goes, would you believe I'm 74 years old? And I said, well, you want to make it to 75, we want to get you out of here. And I literally took him and made him get out of the building.
Then you, of course, had your own terrifying experience. What happened to you next?
Well, as we were leaving the building, I said to him, I said, Mr. Spellman, let me ask you a question. Is there anybody else in there? Do I need to go back in? He goes, there's a daycare in there, but I don't know if all the kids got to get out. I think they got out, he said, but I'm not sure. I said, okay. And I brought him to the ambulance, and I said to the EMS worker, he was found inside the building, and I ran back in the building to see if there were any kids in there. And at that point, when I went inside the building, I found the daycare. There were no kids.
Which must have been a great relief, by the way.
Yes, it was. I overturned all the chairs, and then I ended up in a bank. There must have been a bank in there or something, and I went into the bank and I looked around. I made sure that there was nobody in there. When I went back out into the lobby, I asked again, is there anybody here that I can help? And unfortunately, you still hear the voices saying, they're screaming in the fires, and they're saying, help me. And I said, okay, from trying to direct myself to the voice, I directed myself up the stairs to the second floor where I really thought that I could hear the voices. And unfortunately, they were faint, and you really couldn't hear them.
And then you got trapped?
What happened was I ended up in a dentist office because I remember seeing dental chairs and tools, and there must have been a dental office on the second floor. And I ended up in the kitchen of the dental office. And at that point, there was some kind of explosion. I don't know what had happened. There was some kind of explosion. I got knocked out. I don't know how long I was out. I don't know how long I was in the building.
I know that when you were in the kitchen, the dental office, you were at least able to get some rags and put the...
Well, after I got up, I was unconscious at the time. When I got up and I tried to get my bearings because I was very, very dizzy, there was the room filled with smoke very quickly. So I took rags and put them underneath the door, and I was able to get the water out of the refrigerator and put a rag on my face. I covered myself with water so that the smoke wouldn't bother me.
And how did you ultimately get out?
What would happen was I heard radio transmissions, and I heard the firemen going over the radio transmission saying, it's time to get out, it's time to get out, the building is unstable. And I opened up the door, and I came out of the room, and I said to the firemen, I screamed out, I'm over here, and the firemen came and got me. And thank God for them, because I don't think I would have gotten out of there at all.
And of course, so many lost their lives being heroic, just as you tried to do, and as you were. I know you don't like that word, but you know what?
I don't like the word. I know we've spoken about that. I do want to say that I feel relieved, and I feel very comfortable that the mayor and the police commissioner and the fire commissioner have really made it worth our while to be police officers and to be public servants. And I really feel proud that I was able to help in the smallest capacity possible. I feel proud today that I'm a police officer, and I'll tell you, I never felt as proud as I have up to this time. And I really applaud the mayor. I feel that the mayor has done a wonderful job keeping morale up on this job, which, you know, as you know, morale wasn't always up at many points, but at this point, I think morale is at a very high, and I'm very proud of that.
Well, you have every reason to feel proud, as do
I applaud the New
brothers.
Yorkers, and you know, I applaud everybody. I think that New York really came together in this one.
Sam Esposito, take care of yourself, Sam, and thanks
Thank you.
so much for coming in. We appreciate it.